extraordinary musical collaboration brings together Colin Curry and Håkan Hardenberger. Both musicians are great ambassadors for their instruments and for the creation of new music. When we initially had planned this new project, the Grafenegg Academy for young professional musicians, we had imagined all coming together today in Grafenegg for 2 inspirational weeks. Today we meet online instead, with Colin in Glasgow and Håkan in Malmö in Sweden, and all of you in more than 20 countries and on 4 continents around the world. Nevertheless, we want to take the opportunity to come together this week and work with each other and find out a bit more about this new exciting project. Hi Colin, hi Håkan. You are the artistic curators of the Grafenegg Academy and responsible for this project. What is it all about?
Well, I think Håkan and I wanted to offer our experience as individuals and also from our work together to give the perspective of what can happen through collaboration and just pushing your imagination out as far as it can go and seeing what might occur in terms of how you approach performing, what kind of repertoire you might play, and how you might expand the music that you have available for your instruments, and in all kinds of different combinations. And so we chose a very adventurous way with the repertoire for the Academy that, as well as being present day and looking forward, it also looked back the way through traditions that are important and inspiring for us, and would provide a myriad of talking points for people to gather around and learn from. So it's just a huge, big sort of musical think tank, really.
And, you know, first of all, the situation today, I mean, it would have been so terrible not to do anything. After the heartbreaking process of selecting between all these talents, you know, then not to do anything this year would have been terrible. So I'm glad at least we're doing this. And I think what spoke to me about this project, when you said in the first place, Magdalena, that we were not aiming to have a youth orchestra or another professional orchestra or a school normal academy. This was something in between. And, you know, I spend my life, every morning I try to find the child again and to stay curious. And I think when you are in between, you're not a student anymore, you're a young professional, that can be sometimes one of the great challenges. So I think this provides a platform and a help for people to really fight cynicism and remain creative. And I also think this situation that we have now will emphasize the need to reflect on how we go about music life. You know, I already get the signals in some places. Yes, we have to do what is safe so that we the little audience we can have, we have to treat and do the safe things that they recognize. Well, you could see it in a completely different way also. If you have the possibility of a smaller audience and where you maybe don't have to pay that huge fee for a famous star, then maybe you can also take the opportunity to be really, really creative in the programming. So it's these sort of thoughts that we'll try to infuse into our younger friends.
In the call for musicians, we mentioned that it's a radical new approach that is looking for curiosity, artistic development, and the wish to collaborate as artists within the orchestra and within the groups and with each other. What's this radical approach about, and how would you describe that?
I don't know if it's radical. I think, you know, having toured and played with great orchestras and great conductors, when music making really, really works is when we listen to each other and we let each other play and we hear and we pick up, and everything becomes, however big scale orchestra it is or small, it's about listening and giving, and of course to have the tools to do that. And some things you could call rules, or you could call them tools. It doesn't matter. It's what you need to be able to be free enough to be able to communicate like that. But radical, I'm not so sure. I think what's radical in this is that the programming was actually the easiest part, I think. Don't you agree, Colin? I mean, that was done very, very quickly because we simply really went for what we like. And I remember reading a book by Bruno Walter, I think, where he said that you can't convince an audience if you're not convinced yourself. You should only do the things that you really, really, really like. And it's a huge question. You know, we are too often we are stuck in doing what people tell us, or what it's expected of us, or and we think we do it out of vanity, maybe because then they will like me. And I think we here in the programming we just simply took the things that we like.
Yeah, I think on the repertoire, I remember our discussion about what we would have, and there were so many things that we simply could not do without. So, of course, there was going to be Stravinsky, of course, Beethoven, and then some of the experimental composers, Varese, Charles Ives, and then on through to contemporary music. Håkan and I recently collaborated. In fact, it was, if I may, it was the last concerto I performed before the global meltdown was the Swedish premiere of the absolutely magnificent and somehow incredibly current in terms of how the music feels, percussion concerto by Helen Grime, which Håkan conducted, and myself with the Swedish Chamber Orchestra, and we programmed that. And I think it's so clear that playing this kind of music that has this extremely close relationship with our time now feels more relevant than ever. I mean, cliches come forward at this moment. Things like the arts. You can't escape from the link between the arts and the time that you exist in, and that's probably never ever more true. I mean, how are the arts going to reflect the situation going forward? I mean, obviously we see for now the holding pattern of a lot of online things whilst concerts are sort of off the books. But, what is happening next? And I think, the Academy, the Grafenegg thing is very important at this point in time, in this year, 2020, for the discussion of the future, because it is up for grabs. I mean, the future, again, a cliche, sorry, but they all come out at this point. Future hasn't happened yet. So we can really make this our culture more relevant, more important, more satisfying, more uplifting, more thought-provoking than ever, with enough care going forward.
When we looked for musicians, we always looked for this extra curiosity in our musicians, and that was also something that we looked for when we were reading all the applications that we got for the orchestra, because we found a lot of curiosity in the applications we had. And therefore we asked musicians also for this special session that we have now and this special welcome meeting we have now today, we asked them to send in questions and send us their most burning questions, food for thought, or something they really wanted to know now about the whole program. And I have to read that. One asked me, and I'm sure you can answer that, why did you choose this orchestra repertoire? Which was the criteria to use for the pieces? And another musicians, I'm just going to add that, because that was also regarding the repertoire. Regarding next summer's concerts, we will work on Beethoven and Haydn, and do you intend to build bridges between those pieces and the contemporary pieces that you used? For example, influences between those pieces, or comparing techniques in the pieces and use of the orchestra. Is this something that you're looking for with edition? I guess the pieces were chosen for a reason.
I mean, the question kind of answers itself. We for us, they are closely linked. very much so. All the pieces in the program are closely linked in one way or the other. Whether that's clear to someone else, I don't know. And it might not be necessary. We don't want to be overly teacher-like, but for us, I think it feels like it's organic. So one thing will help the other thing to grow, I think, is the feeling. And some pieces, certain purpose, like the Haydn Symphony, to be played without a conductor. We won't be the first time that happens, but I think it's an important process. So that was there because of that.
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind is when I've spoken with Håkan over the years about Haydn. One composer that immediately comes to mind as the sort of mirror image of him is Stravinsky.
Yes.
And so we have a Haydn symphony, but also we have Stravinsky Dumbarton Oaks. And I mean, Håkan obviously performing the Haydn trumpet concerto, the way that you speak about that is that it's full of life and surprises and articulations and, delight. It's not this sort of middle ground, sort of classical, staid approach. It's full of a sort of Stravinskian joie de vivre and the possibility of excitement and unexpected things happening, an adventure.
All the pieces we've chosen, I think, have the potential of sounding as they were played for the first time. With the element of surprise. And that goes for the more modern things and the older things as well.
And you hear that time and again. I mean, I've been having the time to listen to a lot of music in these weeks that sort of cascade by sort of very slowly, but also in the blink of an eye somehow. But listening to music and having that chance. And I remember it's been very hot here, as it has in a lot of places. And in the back garden one afternoon, slightly sort of sleepy, soporific, but listening to the slow movements of Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata and thinking, this music is from outer space, and it sounds like it was written in the future. I mean, this music is just so wildly, brilliantly imaginative. And this is from Beethoven, who's been dead for such a long time, and we're celebrating this year, as we know, his life. But it's a great moment to take that time to listen to, I think, the slow movements of Beethoven, maybe also in the late quartets and things, and just marvel at how it speaks to us today, and maybe reflect on how we can approach it today.
Yes, and both of us, of course, have been on a sort of search, I think all our careers, to find for our instruments music that somehow will have this quality. I mean, we all look for the storytellers. We are, as long as we're not improvising, we are relying on a written text. And we're both looking for texts that can really give us a story to tell, and that will sound like it comes from a long time ago, or comes from the future, or is timeless. And we keep looking. I think both you and I, we keep looking.
Both of you have worked with numerous contemporary composers. Both of you have premiered so many new pieces, world premiered those pieces. But why do you think that's so important to stand up for that kind of, for new repertoire?
I never knew any other way. I came from a family with no classical music, and I somehow took for granted that that's how it was. That's how it is. We music is a living material, and we are the ones We are the gardeners at the moment, and I thought so. I was quite surprised when I started to learn that it wasn't always so automatic that was the case. But I have kept trying to be naive in that respect, and I think it's absolutely vital that we take the responsibility to keep this being living art form. It's up to us.
Yeah, I've similarly, looking back when I was first discovering classical music, one of my main resources was the Edinburgh Music Library, and I was 12 years old, and I would go in there and I would look for the scores that looked the most interesting to me. So off the shelf, I would take the scores of Stockhausen, Boulez, Elliott Carter, Penderecki, because they looked so exciting and different and sort of vital and alive. So again, I began with classics from the 20th century. The first CDs I ever bought was a box set of the complete works of Anton Webern. Maybe explains a lot. But again, I think in a way that Håkan has this sort of ambition for his instrument, did I have a similar wish for mine, in that I had such a love of my own instrument and respect for it. I really wanted a repertoire with dignity to perform that was maybe a little bit needing some work and improvement. And I think for every musician, that's something that they should think about is what do they really want to play? I mean, there's a lot of existing repertoire now across the board and across all instruments, of course. But I think every instrumentalist should reflect at this point, what do I really want to bring to an audience, and what can I do for the art form?
And of course, I've saved all the 5 Beethoven trumpet concertos for the later part of my career because I wanted to be ready for it.
Well, you got 5. I only got 3 Beethoven percussion concertos. You did better than me.
So curiosity and open-mindedness is really something that goes throughout your career, working as soloists, also working with each other and collaborating on many interesting projects. What are you looking for with young musicians? In our call for musicians, we were looking for a special kind of young professional musician, but what was it exactly that you were looking for?
When I teach, I feel very egotistical because I end up learning a lot. I end up feeling energized and getting more ideas. And I mean, I look forward to meet young musicians and change ideas, and we will all learn from it, I think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, my experience, particularly with percussion seminars that I've been involved with, for example, at Chosen Vale, this dates back to 2011 when I first went there. And I turned up expecting to give masterclasses, but I'm certain I was the player who learned the most that summer. I was rubbing shoulders with percussionists 10 years or more younger than me at that time. And that just their sort of freedom and acumen and commitment was really brilliant. And that was a fantastic thing for me at that time. And I think in Grafenegg, it will be a wonderful exchange for myself and Håkan. I think I speak for both of us and all the tutors, if I may. It's going to be a brilliant way of interacting and forming relationships that will blossom and go forward, I'm sure.
And I really hope people that come will take the opportunity and not be shy and really ask us a lot of questions. Because, I mean, we do, if I look at myself in the trumpet history, I mean, I was a student of Thibault, who was a student of Sabarich, if we talk about the French school, and then I was a student of Tom Stevens, who was a student of Vacchiano, and who was a student of Schlossberg. I mean, for a non-trumpet player, this means not so much, but it just shows that it's not so far back in time. These names that are on books, and we do collectively have a lot of information that we want nothing else but to share it and to see it end up in growing ground.
All programs on campus Grafenegg, and particularly the Academy for Young Professional Musicians, looks for this exchange of ideas. What does that particularly foresee for the Academy, and what's the approach? We are talking about doing some of the pieces without a conductor and really are looking for all musicians to be part of the interpretation rather than having one person to know it all.
There is, of course, a challenge in that we have a text that needs a reading and that needs an interpretation, this text. And I don't know what the democracy in music making is. This is for us to, on each occasion, I mean, every week I turn up normally in the old life. I used to. And you come to an orchestra and there's a conductor and you know they might have a good or a bad relation, and then how far can this democracy and the common reading of this text, how far can that go, and how can we develop this? You know, how possible is it? You know, I mean, I think these experiments have been done since the 60s. We're not the first ones, but I think everybody should try this. And in the theater, it's the same. You know, is it one demonic director who decides? And then sometimes that's very, very good, but not always. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we asked very clearly when we were looking for the musicians for this academy, for people who had just that extra bit of vision, and also I think that ambition to contribute to what ultimately is going to be a short festival of performance events, concerts for sure. So I think it's going to be very good because it's a sort of refreshing of the Grafenegg Academy. This is a new beginning, and musicians will be fully sort of not just welcome, but expected to absolutely contribute and give everything that they're thinking. And no one should be sitting like, oh, I've got an idea, but I don't want to mention it. No, I mean, let us hear. We really want to hear what it is. And, you know, like everyone, it may be something that we absorb or maybe something we discuss and then move on from. But it's just this generosity of ideas is what we're after here. And I really look forward to hearing what's going to be on offer.
We're not only looking for curiosity in our players, but also with our tutors. We have many great tutors joining us for the Academy this week and also next summer, when we will finally be able to all meet in Grafenegg. We've got tutors from all kinds of orchestras, all kinds of approaches. What were you looking for with the other tutors who will join you at the Academy?
The Grafenegg Academy was a great opportunity to invite some of our colleagues from orchestras that Håkan and I have worked with. And I think I speak for both of us in saying that we have an immense, not just respect, but fondness for the orchestral musicians that we work with. And the commitment of these musicians who are often working under, you know, immense pressure and time constraints and the difficulty of assembling often new pieces of music with very little rehearsal sometimes, and maybe for a recording or a broadcast or a world premiere. And it's just dazzling to visit all these different orchestras and get the support and the professionalism and insight from all these musicians. So for Grafenegg, we've invited a collection of our colleagues and friends to offer these insights, these professional insights, these people who are really able to sort of make shortcuts in music and really sort of grab things and tell you exactly what you need to know and offer just that extra bit of advice that's sort of so important and can only come from experience, really. So they're absolutely crucial to the functioning of the Academy, and a great bunch of musicians and people.
And I think they're first and foremost musicians, and they are in an orchestra, but I think they're all examples of people who have taken this step that we were talking about in the beginning, and managed to fight cynicism and stayed curious, and they've been successful in exactly the things that we try to work with here.
One of our orchestra fellows sent the question, where do you see our profession heading for the next 50 years, and what can we do as musicians to help shape it for the better?
We can never know what the future will be. I mean, just look at the last few months. We have no idea. I think all we can do is try to be the best we possibly can. You know, the best in not as in achieving necessarily, but the best in trying and in communicating and creating good rings on the water by throwing something into the water at the right spot. I think that's all one can do, and keep thriving and look as far ahead as possible, but one step at a time, and then hoping that, you know, in 50 years it will be a good thing. But my God, we cannot know.
Yeah, I similarly, I feel very strongly that as musicians, there is a huge collective result from good inquiry, imagination, and meticulous preparation, and good live music making, good concerts. But on a molecular level, I think we all have to find our sweet spot, and you never know when something you do is going to be of that vital importance for someone you may even never get to meet. But as musicians, we are quite privileged, and I think we must hold our heads high and not forget that we have this visibility, or to mix it up, we have people's ears. And if you have someone's ears, you have their minds, and you have this possibility to make people think and sort of stop and consider themselves, their lives, and art. And it's an amazingly creative thing, and it's full of possibilities. So I think as a musician, you have to take maximum responsibility for your own efforts, and just the sky's the limit, and just aim very, 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 very high from your own side and your own performance values and what you seek with them.
One question was, and I found that very interesting, of one of the Academy Fellows, what was the greatest challenge now to put an online Academy program together? The way we planned it for these 2 weeks where we would have extensive time to work with each other will take place next year, but what was the challenge and the idea behind doing an online academy this summer?
I think very much the time that we're spending together this week is very much based in this week and at this point in time. And although it was absolutely gutting to have to postpone the academy that we'd planned with so much excitement and sort of passion and delight, we've been dealt this extraordinarily difficult hand as people, and at this point, I think we really have to consider for ourselves how best to use the time, and what's going to happen between now and indeed the rescheduled academy next year, and how best to use that time. And so it's a kind of forum for how we can use, maybe the one, I wouldn't say maybe positive thing, because it's so hard to look at it that way, but the benefit that we've all been given is this huge amount of extra time. We do have these extra hours, and it's how to use them. Are we going to fill them with crazy amounts of practice? Perhaps to a certain extent, but also so many other things I think should be used as stimulus and the chance to read and expand and just sort of reconsider priorities and goals as musicians.
For me, the challenge of the online academy is obvious. Since I really haven't lived my life online at all, the challenge for me is to find the right button on the computer to push.
As a new format in this online academy, the two of you suggested a curators forum where you will talk with each other about topics that are dear to your heart. We will be touching topics of collaboration, which is something that both of you have, is something of great importance in your artistic life, and you have this great collaboration with each other. You are going to talk about careers, and we're also finally talking about commissioning pieces and contemporary music. And in that curators forum will then also be joined by Constantia Gursi, this summer's composer in residence of the Grafenegg Festival. Can you maybe talk or tell us a bit more about the curators forum and the topics?
I think one of the enjoyable things with this way of communicating is that while one is talking, the other one has to shut up.
A rare privilege.
Yes. Now, but I have found that sometimes, and also because maybe there's slightly limited time, sometimes the discussions in this forum, there's something about it distilling things slightly. And I think, I mean, when we rehearse, we don't talk a lot. We don't ask a lot of questions, and I'm sure we have quite a lot of questions for each other. That, you know, even after many years of friendship, we haven't sort of talked about us because we haven't found it necessary, to be honest. Which is one of the, of course, pillars of collaboration. When you find people where this just happens. But I'm sure, I mean, it's certainly going to be interesting for us. I hope it will be interesting also for someone else.
Yeah, I think what we're keen to do is share from our experience the sort of edification and the great inspiration that each of us has taken from the paths that we've chosen and worked for, which I think are led by collaboration and also the composers that we worked with. And, you know, Håkan and I are linked by a number of composers who have written for both of us. Harrison Birtwistle, Rolf Wallin, Mark Anthony Turnage, H.K. Gruber. They've all written pieces for each of us. And so we do have a lot in common. And I think we're keen to just share what it's meant to us and what it can be for a musician to find these kind of people in their lives, whether they're collaborators, composers, or a bit of both. This is just something that we're passionate about and it's kind of believe in. It's sort of a philosophy that we both share, is that the good things come of this kind of approach.
Why do you think it's also so important to talk about topics outside? We will, for example, this week for this extra session, we will have BBC Three radio host Tom Service joining us for a session. You will also talk to him, talking about the topic, what's the point of classical music before, during and after COVID-19. Do you think musicians also ought to be open to other topics beyond the music?
Anything else is completely impossible. I mean, you have to fill your head with ideas. And by reading or looking at nature or looking at the paintings or whatever, something needs to come in for something to come out. There's no other way, you know. There's no magic.
I mean, it can happen, but it's unbelievably rare that you would have an interesting artist who lives in a vacuum. And the musicians who've interested me have always turned out to be the ones who have had interesting lives. And let's face it, you know, the ups as well as the downs, have all contributed to what comes out of their horn.
They're not always nice people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that could be interesting too in small doses. But yeah, I mean, one of my great mentors was British composer Steve Martland, and I remember him when I was still a teenager. He told me, because I was obsessed with practicing. I would practice 10, 12 hours a day, and that was the start and the finish for me. And he said to me, "Look, that's no good. You know, what makes an interesting musician is what you're interested in. It's whether you read Robertson Davies novels or you love the Marx Brothers, or whatever it is. You know, that's what makes an interesting musician." And I was like, okay, wow, I really need to start thinking about this too. But that's the good thing, because obviously it's one thing to be in the practice room, but to sit down with an epic novel or watch an incredible film or go to the theatre, have that experience, these are the great pleasures of life, and they all feed in and come back out. So
and in
that's
fact,
a win-win.
In fact, that's also a great part of collaboration, because the person you collaborate with will also give you ideas. Well, have you read this book? Have you seen this? Have you had that thought? So that's a huge part of collaborating, is that it widens your spectrum.
I mean, regarding this week and regarding the next 50, how many weeks is it? Yeah, well, 370 something days until we will finally see each other in person in Grafenegg. What's your advice for our Grafenegg Academy fellows?
I think Colin's advice of really treasuring time sounded very great to me, and to enjoy the fact that we have more time. It might be a slower life than usual, which is not necessarily bad. And other than that, I think for the most of our younger colleagues, it will be, as for me, that the instrument is very much part of you, almost like a part of the body. And you know, when this happened, first week, I didn't want to get out of bed, and then I realized, just get up and play the trumpet, because that's, you know, it makes you feel like you know. And for me, that has been very important to have the structure of getting up and practice, and then read books, and then you know, enjoy time. But there is something very, very beautiful that we have as musicians that not so many people have the opportunity to use as an engine in life. It's an incredible force that we have, and we should make use of it.
That's good. Can't add to that.